Okay, we're live. All right, well, thanks to everyone for tuning in. We're here with Dr. Mark Siddall, curator for the Division of Invertebrate Zoology at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and Dr. Donald Hopkins, vice president of health programs at the Carter Center. 2 weeks ago, we published a video about how guinea worm disease, this parasitic infection affecting certain parts of Africa, has been reduced from an estimated 3.5 million cases in the 80s down to 126 in 2004. So before we begin, hopefully we could get the two of you to tell us a little bit more about yourselves, the type of work you do, and how you've been involved with this.
Okay, well,
Dr. Hopkins, do you mind starting?
All right, well, thanks to everyone for tuning in. We're here with Dr. Mark Siddall, curator for the Division of Invertebrate Zoology at the American Museum of Natural History in New York, and Dr. Donald Hopkins, vice president of health programs at the Carter Center. 2 weeks ago, we published a video on guinea worm disease, this parasitic infection affecting certain parts of Africa. Has been reduced from an estimated
one second.
That's all right.
126 in 2000.
Sorry about that. Can you both still hear me?
Certainly.
Now I can.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what happened. Sorry about that. I guess to pick it back up, Dr. Hopkins, can you start by telling us a little bit more about yourself and what you do?
Sure. I'm in charge of the health programs now at the Carter Center. We're working for a long time on eradicating guinea worm disease, and since then on river blindness and schistosomiasis, trachoma, and some other tropical diseases. Before I came to the Carter Center, I worked in the smallpox eradication program, spent 2 years in Sierra Leone, West Africa, and then 3 months in West Bengal, India, and also spent 2 weeks training Ethiopian sanitarians and U.S. Peace Corps volunteers at the beginning of the smallpox program in Ethiopia. After that, I wrote a book on the history of smallpox, the greatest killer smallpox in history, to illustrate the impact of smallpox on people in various stages of life around the globe. Many of the lessons I learned in the smallpox eradication program, I've been now applying those lessons and experiences to the guinea worm eradication program.
Great. Dr. Siddall?
Yeah, I'm a curator at the American Museum of Natural History. I work on a variety of invertebrates, but I'm also a parasitologist and have long been a parasitologist, mostly wildlife parasitology. Presently the president-elect of the American Society of Parasitologists, and my engagement in this particular program with the Carter Center has two aspects to it. One is my fascination with parasites and our responsibility as scientists, of course. But furthermore, the collaboration that we undertook in the last couple of years to put together an exhibition that is celebrating the eradication, or the soon eradication, hopefully, of only the second disease of humans.
And for anyone who may have not watched the video or might not be familiar with guinea worm disease, Dr. Hopkins, do you mind giving us a quick breakdown of what it entails?
Guinea worm is a parasite, as you heard, that people acquire by drinking contaminated water from open ponds or stagnant bodies of water. After a year, this parasite has grown to a length of 2 to 3 feet and then emerges very slowly directly through the skin over the course of several days, weeks, or even 1 or 2 months. It's very painful. People are crippled temporarily and in very large numbers. When the parasite is emerging, she's trying to eject hundreds of thousands of larvae back into the water to continue the cycle where the parasite, these microscopic stages of the parasite, are taken up by a water flea, which then harvests the parasite, and then people drinking such water become infected again. This disease as you mentioned early on, we estimated there were 3.5 million cases in 1986. We're down to 126 cases now. But in addition to being a horrible disease, a painful disease, it affects people's ability to, children's ability to go to school because people are crippled for weeks or months, temporarily usually, and it keeps people from farming as well. So it has impact on health, on agricultural productivity, and on education of children.
And how is it that you're able to estimate that there are exactly 126 cases? Is that just a rough estimate, or do you know precisely where the remaining cases are?
We know the names of each of those 126 people. 70 of them, 70, are in South Sudan last year. 40 were in Mali, 3 in Ethiopia, and 13 in Chad. And so we have village volunteers in the areas where this disease has occurred over the last few years, looking, talking to their neighbors, looking daily for cases of disease. So we're very confident in that number. We know exactly where those people are.
And Dr. Siddall, I know I asked you this before when we met earlier, but what exactly defines eradication?
Well, so we use a few different terms when it comes to dealing with various human infections, and in fact other infections of domestic animals or livestock for that matter as well. And specifically, the word control really is used to represent a situation in which a particular disease, be it smallpox or guinea worm or Ebola, is in a state of management that it's not overwhelming a local healthcare system. Obviously, that wasn't the case with respect to Ebola in Western Africa in the last year. The word elimination is used for the riddance of a particular disease, stopping transmission and the getting rid of a disease in a particular geographic area. Normally that's really defined by countries because countries are responsible for their own healthcare systems, for example, and it always requires the cooperation of these countries. So that's elimination. Eradication is that state in which the disease no longer exists in nature, anywhere, everywhere.
And speaking of that, Dr. Hopkins, what year was it that smallpox was officially eradicated?
1977 was the last case of smallpox. It was certified then 3 years later by the World Health Organization in 1980.
I see.
And that's an important distinction, that once transmission has been stopped in a particular area, it's not until the World Health Organization, for example, does that certification. One has to demonstrate the lack of transmission for a period of 3 years, for example. And that goes for everything from guinea worm to river blindness to polio.
And the World Health Organization is undertaking that process now for the guinea worm eradication program, so that of the 21 countries that originally had guinea worm disease when the program began in 1980, 17 now have been certified as having eliminated guinea worm disease. So we're only, the World Health Organization still has only, among the countries that originally had guinea worm disease, only 4 of those remain to be certified. There are 4 other countries that also need to be certified, Sudan and Kenya, which had guinea worm disease but have not yet done the due diligence they need to do to report adequately to the World Health Organization. And then Angola, and there's another country that I'm not remembering now that have never had guinea worm disease. Angola and the Democratic Republic of Congo have not had guinea worm disease during the time of this eradication program, but they also still need to file an adequate report to the World Health Organization.
Thank you. This is more of a question for both of you, I suppose, but I understand that the Carter Center has initiated a $100 incentive. Can you explain how that works? I understand it's a tactic to track down the remaining cases. Is that correct?
This is each of the remaining endemic countries. In fact, some of those that have also already eliminated the disease have now, it varies a little bit because of local currency, but Mali, South Sudan, Chad, and Ethiopia each now have posted rewards of approximately $100 US for people, anyone who reports a case of guinea worm disease. This is a powerful incentive to reporting. It turns, ideally, everybody in the country into a reporting agent, which just makes the reporting system that much more sensitive. This is another lesson that's taken from the smallpox eradication program. And for example, now, even now, there is still a reward posted by WHO, World Health Organization, of $1,000 US for anyone who reports a proven case of smallpox.
So,
no, just, there's a lot of different things that go into eradicating a disease or eliminating it in a particular area. And I think most people probably think it's, do we have a way to intervene? Usually what most people think about is a vaccine, like was available for smallpox and for polio. But as you've just noticed, there's an incentivization that's also required to get people to be involved. And that actually connects not just with the delivery of the intervention, but with gathering the information. These are enormous tasks of data management and data gathering to figure out where people are infected and to find out what strategies are working to deliver the services that people need.
And I should mention, among those strategies, we don't, as Mark has just mentioned, we don't have a vaccine. We don't have a drug that we can give people, even if we knew they were infected. We don't have a way of knowing people who are infected. It's a full calendar year on average between the time somebody drinks contaminated water to when this worm begins to emerge. And we have no way of knowing who those people are until the worm begins to emerge. So the ways we are helping countries to eliminate this infection is by teaching people that this infection is coming from their drinking water, teaching them to filter their water through a finely woven cloth of some type, or a pipe filter with a cloth sewn fastened to the end of it. There's a chemical, a bait, that's being donated that we can put into the water to kill the parasite in the water. Obviously, to provide people with clean drinking water from borehole wells or a source such as that. And also education, to teach people not only to filter their drinking water all the time, but to not let persons who have worms coming out of their body go into the drinking water source physically to contaminate the water in the first place. And so those are the tools that they have. They're not sexy, but they're effective. And that's what we're using to get rid of this infection.
So
go ahead.
I was just wondering, so because it takes a full year for the worm to develop, and right now there are 126 cases remaining, is it possible that there are some people that have worms growing inside them right now that we just don't know about, and that number could increase?
It's likely that there are people now that we don't know about who have the infection. We think they're going to be significantly less than 126 cases this year, but we have no way of knowing who those people are. What we're going to experience this year are people who were infected last year. And this infection the parasite has to pass through human beings each year. And so once we stop it from passing through human beings, it won't be able to maintain itself outside of going through humans.
But imagine what the task was for the Carter Center there, and also all the in-country health programs, to try to convince people that this worm that's coming out of them, this year, was a result of something that happened a complete other year ago during the wet season back then, and there's a dry season in between. The importance of education is incredibly important for, of course, eradicating guinea worm and for all of these other programs. One of the things that we tried to, Don and I both are very proud of, I think, in terms of the exhibition Countdown to Zero at the American Museum of Natural History, is that we really highlighted people in the show. It's so much more about people and engagement and education and strategy and the investment and the buying in, if you will, of local community and their empowerment. It's more than it is about disease and destruction and intervention and so forth. So it's a very, if you will, narrative positive show, and I think it's one that we're both very proud of. And these strategies of engagement and getting the local communities to be deeply invested in their own healthcare is something that I think Dr. Hopkins and others showed during the smallpox campaigns. They've now shown it during the guinea worm eradication campaign. There's an unfortunate story from the last 24 to 48 hours in which people refusing polio vaccination have been arrested. That's probably not a way to get the community to back your efforts to eradicate a disease. You really want them to be partners in this.
Absolutely, and I would just add that the fact that we have this 1-year incubation period, as we call it, as Mark has just mentioned, has made it difficult for people in communities to understand about this disease. But once they do understand about it, most of them act and are willing to act immediately. And one of the most powerful tools we have used is to filter the water that they're drinking from these stagnant ponds through a cloth and then backwash that into a small jar of water and let people see the little intermediate crustacean, water fleas they're called, microscopic, see those little things and other things, of course, swimming around in the water that they're drinking. That immediately helps people to understand, make the connection between their drinking water and this parasite. And that has proven to be a very powerful and convincing tool to help people to understand the need to act, to protect, be special about the water that they drink to avoid this parasite.
I'm just curious. The first time I saw videos of the fieldwork that the two of you took part in, it was mind blowing to see that this is actually a disease. It seems something like it was out of a horror movie. What was your initial reaction when you first discovered this disease and found out what it was all about, what it entailed?
Well, I first became aware of guinea worm disease when I was a sophomore in college studying biology. Just a photograph of a woman with a worm coming out of her body was just so dramatic, and I never forgot about it. I have, since before I went to medical school, have been interested in parasitic diseases, but encountering this disease in the field, especially to me in children, and seeing children suffering so much about this, I marvel at the ability of human beings to stay sane with a worm coming out of their body causing a lot of pain for several days, much less weeks or months, and much less one worm. People can have, in the same year, several worms, dozens of worms, in fact. And so, to me, it's a testimony to the resilience of human beings that they have this year after year and still stay sane.
For me, when I was with the Carter Center in Eastern Equatoria in South Sudan, there was a young girl who was exactly the same age as my daughter, 9 years old at the time, and she had a worm coming out from behind the back of her knee. On the one hand, I had known about guinea worm. I was trained as a parasitologist, took parasitology as an undergraduate at the University of Toronto, and have sort of dedicated my life to that. But to see it firsthand and to see as Don suggests and Don says, the pain that this causes, it struck me at that moment that there are lots of parasites that cause pain, lots of parasites and diseases that cause illness. This is one of humans that must cause pain in order to complete the life cycle. That's what it does. It creates this burning, terrible blister, and that causes individuals to go seek the cooling effects of water. That's where the adult worm wants you to be so that she can dump her larvae into that body of water where they'll get picked up by water fleas and complete the life cycle. It's really about causing pain. It's diabolical. And as far as I'm concerned, the Toposa and Eastern Equatoria are the last great dragon slayers.
Well, it looks like that's all I really had for my questions. Is there anything else that either of you wanted to add, or something that isn't talked about typically related to this that you wish?
Well, I would just recall February 2007 when the chairman of our board of Carter Center's Board of Trustees, John Moores, chartered a plane, and President and Mrs. Carter and several of the rest of us were up in northern Ghana, where the local water system had broken down. It had been in ill repair for a few years, had been neglected, broke down the year before, and now there were, when we arrived in northern Ghana in February 2007, there were scores. Ghana, it turned out, had reported 1,003 cases of guinea worm disease the month before. And when we were up at this town of Sabalulu, there was just scores of people, adults and children, but the children suffering, crying with these worms coming out of their body. It was, as a reporter we had along with us said, it was a scene from hell. But it was really torment for me as a non-practicing pediatrician to see that many children simultaneously suffering so terribly, and to know that it was entirely preventable, that we, the adults, had failed them, causing them to continue to suffer this problem. That, to me, was my worst moment with guinea worm disease. And so I would just mention that as a visual portrait of what this parasite can do. And in years past, it was much worse than it was even then, because the intensity of transmission was greater, and people got many, many more worms coming out of all kinds of different places of their body. And it was really, it was just outrageous that it has been allowed to go even this long.
I would just say, I think what's really important right now, and what's really possible right now because of social media, because of Google Hangouts, because of Mashable, because of our collaborative exhibition at the museum, Countdown to Zero, is that there's an ability for people to talk about these things globally now and keep laser focused on disease eradication, be it guinea worm, polio, malaria, lymphatic filariasis, river blindness. These things are possible, and showing that they're possible and seeing how they're possible is actually really important. So, really, we do want people to come and see the exhibition at the museum and learn more about this. We want people to see how the sense of shared humanity is what is really required to triumph over disease. And I think too often we've lost that sense of shared humanity, and we've allowed things like measles to run amok when it doesn't have to.
Well, Dr. Hopkins, Dr. Siddall, thank you so much for your time, and thanks to everyone who's tuning in right now. Did you both have anything else you want to add?
Just to thank you very much for the opportunity, and to let everyone know what a hero Don Hopkins is. He will have been involved in eradicating not one, but 2 human diseases, which is just absolutely fantastic.
I was preparing to say ditto, but ditto minus the Don Hopkins hero bit. Thank you very much, Mark, and congratulations on the exhibit.
Thanks for your collaboration.
Okay, thanks a lot, everyone.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.